Hill 671 here, and I'm going to show you today how to make a simple 4-foot 48-inch diameter water wheel out of some old junky wood. Replaced redwood deck boards or torn some out. What to do with all that old nasty redwood 2x6. Items needed will be preferably a 16 gauge finish nailer, like Home Depot special right there. A cordless drill driver, to have an impact driver, and the basics: tape measure, speed square, and obviously something to mark with. You could do this with a hand miter saw, but I would recommend a chop saw or radial arm saw would work too. So the idea behind this design is to use up 2x6s, old deck material, but of course, as you can see here, we've got 2x4s used as the spoke, so you will need a little bit of 2x4 material, but the water buckets, the outside rim, and this center hub piece, and most of it will actually be short pieces of 2x6, which is what you end up with if you rip out a a lot of stuff like this where you've got rotten ends and nails sticking out and all that. I've been pulling the nails out only because you could just cut these ends off with the chop saw, but you risk hitting a nail that you didn't see, which I did once already with my blade. So I would recommend just pulling all the nails out of the boards you're going to use. The thing you'll need is a nice flat work area to lay this out and assemble it, which, concrete garage floor, driveway. I'm using the back of a flatbed truck, which is flat enough to keep the whole thing flat and straight and even. With our 4-foot water wheel, start with a center spoke of the wheel, which is just going to be a 4-foot length of 2x4 redwood. 2x4, our 4-footer, we just want to mark the center layout, which is going to be, draw a line right at 2 feet. So once you've got your 4-foot or your 2-foot center marked, just strike a line with a square. Then for your cross spokes, perpendicular spoke, you're going to cut 2 pieces at 22 1/4. Measure in from one side or the other and make a mark at 1 3/4 inch as a center mark on each one of the spokes. 4 more pieces for your intermediate spokes at 21 1/2. Actually, might as well double everything you're doing, because you might as well cut pieces for both sides. So you cut 8 intermediate spokes at 21 1/2 inches. Take your one end of each one of your intermediate spoke pieces, and from the center line strike a 45 going each way. You're going to cut each of your 8 intermediate spokes right on your 45 line. So what you want to end up with is something that comes to a point on one end and measures 21 1/2 inches overall from the point back to the other end. When you're finished cutting the intermediate spokes, you should have 8 like this that come to a point on the one end at a 45 taper and measure 21 1/2 inches overall from the point to the back. This is where it helps to have a nail gun, but taking wood glue on the secondary spoke, line up your toenail it in, and same thing with the other side. Wood glue, line up the 2 marks so that you know you're in the center, and toenail it in. Use these composite deck screws. They're expensive, but they're the best for holding things together, and they have this square drive head which doesn't strip as much. And the next step is to use screws at an angle similar to the toenail. And I start the other one before burying the first one so that it doesn't push the wood one way or the other. You can bury this one. Countersink them below the surface of the wood. Time for a new battery. Make sure these screws are all the way in, and if there's nails sticking out at all, just drive them in with a nail set or a drift or a punch or something. Take your intermediate spoke pieces that you just cut and prepared and arrange them good side up into the corners as such, so that they should fit in with your 45-degree point that you prepared, like so. And then we're not going to screw or nail them. We just want them sitting there in the corners at this point. Now what you want to do is take this intermediate spoke and split the difference between the 90s on both sides of it. And you should have about 15 1/8 from the outside corner there to the outside corner there, and move it a little bit. And if you split the difference exactly, it should be just a little bit over 15 inches, or right around in the neighborhood of 15 inches. We're not nailing these intermediates in, we're just going to let them sit there at this point. So these next pieces make up the outer rim of the wheel, of the water wheel, and this is where your leftover deck material comes in. This is where you use up the old 2x6 because you're going to cut it into really short pieces. So what you want to end up with is a section that is 15 inches on the long end, and then each of these angles are cut at 22.5 degrees, which is half of 45. Some water wheels I've seen have a 10 spokes or 6 spokes, but the reason we're using 8 spoke is it makes this whole layout easier. These are all normal angle cuts, 45s. And then out here on the edge, with our outside of the wheel perimeter pieces, this angle ends up at 22.5, which is a standard on all chop saw miter saws. These outer wheel pieces, the good part about this is it's a standard cut. 22.5 is a standard notch on most miter saws, and that's going to give you exactly the angle you want for the outside pieces. When you're all done, you should make 16 of these, 8 for each side. And again, this is the only part really where consistency and length is kind of important, because this is going to make up the outside perimeter. So you want these to be, if these are all the same, 8 on each side, your wheel will be pretty close to round. That is, without nailing anything in, you're going to, after you've cut your 8 or 16 outside perimeter pieces, just set them all into place to make up the circumference of your wheel. Again, we're not gluing or nailing anything yet, we're just setting everything into place, because there might be some adjustment at this point, which you can do. You can move these intermediate spokes to make these guys fit a little bit better if need be. Up with a situation like this where these aren't going in flush on one side, and then there's big, gap on the other side, and they go way down. It just means that this intermediate 90-degree spoke is out of square, and you just need to push it one way or the other to fix the problem. And once you're satisfied with the fitment, in other words, these are all pretty close to flush or slightly recessed beyond the spokes, then you can go ahead and start gluing and toenailing the ends together. And while you're fitting these outside pieces, leave this floating here so that you can, make adjustments to make this more consistent. You can move these in or out because this spoke will still move from side to side, and just kind of get them as consistent as you can. And it's not a piano, it's a water wheel, so it doesn't have to be perfect. So take each one once you've got them fitted, a little bit of whatever, a little bit of wood glue or liquid nails or whatever your preference there. Put the good side up and fit them in. Take your finish nail gun and eye toenail from the spoke together. Before you screw any of this together, you just go around and take each piece, put glue on both sides, fit it in there, and then use your nail gun to toenail it together, and just do that all the way around before you put any screws in. I'm all glued in, so you just go around and toenail all of them into the spokes. Try and keep them consistent on the outside, flush, or as close to it as possible. Shoot a nail into your finger. Okay. And once you're at this point, it's glued and just toenailed with a nail gun, so you can actually spin it to work on it, put the screws in. But remember, these are still just loose, floating in here, so you don't want to try and pick it up yet. These are all still, they might be pinched, but they're still not attached by any fastener yet. With your old, deck wood, it could split easily, so you're better off to pre-drill with a bit slightly smaller than, the size of the screw you're using. Not too close to the edge, so at an angle towards the spoke. And then screwing these in will strengthen it considerably together. Just keep rotating it on your work surface, or if you're on the concrete floor or whatever, and just keep doing that on all 8 sides until you're done. When you're all done screwing them in, you should end up with a somewhat round wheel, and the center pieces are loose, which we'll address next.